What's up, YouTube? This is AmKay at Purple Sky 11, and this is part 9 of my series exploring the documents related to the investigation into the death of Owen Hart. This episode will feature more interviews with the manufacturer and distributor of the stunt rigging. We'll take a look at a crime lab report with findings on what those pills were that were found among Owen's personal property, and there's a few viewing of property reports to go over. If you enjoy the content, I hope you'll consider subscribing and maybe hit that thumbs up while you're down there. If you'd like to support the channel, you may send contributions to the Cash App link in the description box. And there's also a new way to show your support directly via YouTube with the Super Thanks option. When you purchase a Super Thanks, you will see a special animated GIF, and as an added bonus, you will get a distinct, colorful banner to highlight your comment. A huge thank you to everyone who's been helping out along the way. And now, let's get into today's content. Alright, and the first one that we're going to look at today is a supplemental interview with Mark Gibson from Lumar in Hampshire, England. And Lumar is the manufacturer of the snap shackle device that was used for the stunt with Owen Hart. And this is actually the second time that we know of for sure that police will be speaking with Mark Gibson regarding this case. The first report that we looked at was in part 6, if you'd like to go back and take a look at that. This report is by Detective William Martin, still with the homicide unit, and the date now on our timeline is 6/22/1999. And on that day, at 10:50 a.m., the reporting detective, Detective Martin, contacted Mark Gibson, who is a technical advisor for Lumar Industries in Hampshire, England, regarding the titled case, that being the investigation into the death of Owen Hart. And he was contacted to obtain additional information that was not covered during previous interviews on a product manufactured by their company. That product, of course, being the snap shackle device that was used for Owen's stunt. And so during this interview, Gibson was asked if there must be pressure on the trigger latch shackle device for it to operate and open. And Gibson said there must be tension on the device for it to open, and the amount of weight that is applied to the device does not affect the shackle device in its release. Gibson stated he would assume that when the device would get close to its maximum load limit breaking point, that would be the only time that weight would affect the operation of the device. Well, I'm not so sure assumptions as to the effectiveness of this device is the best road to go down for this particular case. And then it says here that Gibson stated he was not sure if his company has done any specific testing relating to shackle release when it is taken close to the maximum breaking point. And that is the end of that document, as you can see the signature down here at the bottom. And the next one that we're going to take a look at is an interview with Donna Mary Amsky, who is an attorney for AmSpec. And this is actually the second time, again, that we know of for sure that police spoke with this individual. And I'll refer you back to part 6 if you'd like to see more about that. This is another report by Detective William Martin with the homicide unit. And we're moving on to the next day on the timeline of this investigation. So now it's 6/23/1999. And on that day, at 11 o'clock a.m., Detective Martin was contacted by Donna Mary Amsky, attorney for AmSpec Company, by telephone. Okay, so it was actually Donna Mary Amsky, attorney for AmSpec, who contacted Detective Martin in this instance. And her reason for calling was to let Detective Martin know that the documents he had requested from AmSpec have been gathered and that she would ship these documents to him by mail. This says that Mary Amsky inquired as to the status of the police investigation, and she was told that the case is still open with a few items left to complete. Then she asked as to the whereabouts of the equipment used during the stunt involving this case, and she was told that the police department had custody of all the equipment. At that point, Mary Amsky was told that the police department was still checking on a specialist to examine the equipment. And Mary Amsky was asked if she knew who the riggers were that had previously worked for the WWF and with Owen in completing this stunt the time prior to the event in which Owen had died. and she stated that she did know who that person was, and that person has been retained by their firm as an expert regarding the civil case filed on behalf of Owen as the victim. So this is now a full month since Owen's death, and police, according to this report, still don't know the name of the person who did the rigging for WWF and who had worked with Owen the only other time that he did this stunt. And they're still trying to find a specialist to examine this equipment. Meanwhile, AmSpec already has this individual on retainer as an expert regarding the civil case. And then this report says Mariansky was asked if... So then, is this for real? I can't, this is nuts. But then police ask Mariansky if they could interview this rigger, and she tells Detective Martin that she advised this rigger not to make any statements to anyone regarding the stunt, the equipment, or the victim, Owen Hart. Okay, so you can't make this stuff up. I'm sorry, I am not making fun of the tragedy that occurred here, but I am laughing at the ridiculous nature of this particular conversation between a homicide detective investigating a death and a lawyer for the company that is a distributor of the Snapshackle device. And it gets even better because then Mariamsky stated she would check with her partner and discuss the option of this person being interviewed by the police with the attorneys present. And then she would recontact the reporting detective with the answer. And she would not provide this person's identity to Detective Martin at the present time. Okay, so she's gonna check with her partner and discuss the option of this person being interviewed by police with the attorneys present. And what I'd like to know is why aren't the police saying, there's no option here. We will speak to this person. Where's the authority? I'm confused. This is just funny. Not funny, but funny strange. I mean, this sounds like so ridiculous. But that's the end of that document, as you can see by the signature of the supervisor here at the bottom. But I don't know. Any thoughts that you have that you'd like to share, please feel free to leave them in the comments section. And next up, we're going to look at another crime lab report. This says report number 4, and this is dated 6/30/1999. And this is a report by Danielle L. Jansen, and it says here that she is a criminalist. And a criminalist is a specialist in the collection and examination of the physical evidence of crime. And if you've been following this series, then you're aware that in part 7, we looked at a personal property inventory report, and there were some items that were found in some luggage that belonged to Owen Hart that police had collected as evidence. And one of those items was a pill bottle that had some unidentified pills inside. And now this crime lab report is the evidence and results of the tests done to identify those pills. And this says the following items were recovered by Detective Martin, Homicide Unit, from 1125 Locust, which is the address of the Kansas City, Missouri Police, on 6/16/1999, and submitted as lab page number 4 on 6/29/1999 under Property and Evidence, control number 060433. And again, you can see more about this in part 7. And we're looking now at the item number 4-1. It says pill bottles with white tops containing unknown pills. And I used this pill identifier wizard that I found at drugs.com. The link will be in the description box, but I used this to look up these pills that are listed here. So let's take a look at what they found here. It says the 2 medicine bottles contained 8 different types of tablets and capsules. The approximately 18 tablets labeled L478 were coded to contain calcium carbonate, an uncontrolled substance. And according to drugs.com, that imprint and that type of medication is an antacid, a chewable antacid. And from the image here, it looks like, what the hell are they called? Like a Tums? Those chewable tablets that come in assorted fruit flavors or something? I think that's what these were. The 16 blue tablets labeled Valtrex 500 milligram were coded to contain valacyclovir, an uncontrolled substance. and it looks like that particular medication would be 500 milligrams of Valtrex. And according to drugs.com, Valtrex is used in the treatment of cold sores and for the suppression of the herpes simplex virus. And just to be clear, I am not making the claim that Owen Hart suffered in any way, shape, or form from any sexually transmitted disease, let alone herpes. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that he did have this particular medication in a pill bottle that was found in his luggage. Next listed here, it says the 31 white tablets labeled L019 and aspirin were coded to contain aspirin, an uncontrolled substance. While I feel aspirin is relatively self-explanatory, I wasn't able to find an aspirin with the specified imprint that's in this report. The closest thing I could find is an aspirin L. Moving on, it says the 12 yellow and orange capsules labeled Mylan 101 were coded to contain tetracycline, an uncontrolled substance. In this case, Mylan would be the pharmaceutical manufacturer and distributor of these particular pills. And tetracycline is an oral antibiotic used to treat a broad spectrum of conditions from acne to anthrax. Again, I'm not speculating one way or the other what medical reason or reasons these specific medicines were prescribed for. I'm just relaying the information from the police report as to what was found in Owen Hart's property. Next listed here, the 3.5 white tablets labeled Xanax and the number 2 were coded to contain alprazolam, a Schedule IV controlled substance. Alprazolam is a generic term for Xanax, a benzodiazepine, which is a type of drug prescribed to treat anxiety. Benzodiazepines are a Schedule IV drug, which means even though it's a controlled substance, it may have therapeutic benefits, despite the potential for abuse. But I can tell you, as someone who has experience working at a residential drug and alcohol treatment facility, benzodiazepines are very much addictive, and the withdrawal symptoms can be severe, and without medical supervision can lead to death. Moving on here, it says the 10 blue tablets labeled G3721 were coded to contain alprazolam, a Schedule IV controlled substance. So that's also Xanax. Just a pill of a different shape and color with a different imprint, which just indicates a different manufacturer or supplier, and a different dosage. These were 1 milligram pills. And next it says the 2 blue tablets labeled Mylan A1 were coded to contain alprazolam, a Schedule IV controlled substance. So this is another type of alprazolam manufactured by Mylan Pharmaceuticals. So if you're keeping track, we're up to 3 different kinds of alprazolam at this point. It's the same drug, just different dosages, different imprints. And as you can see here on the screen, by looking up the imprint of the pill, you're able to find out a lot of information about the manufacturer, what scheduled drug it is, what class of drug it is, and lots of other information about the specific pill. Last on the list, the 4 blue tablets labeled APO10 contained diazepam, a Schedule IV controlled substance. Yikes. Diazepam is another type of benzodiazepine, more commonly known as Valium. And the imprint specified in this report indicates that these specific pills were manufactured in Singapore. So of the 8 different types of tablets and capsules recovered from the personal property of Owen Hart, 4 of them were Schedule IV controlled substances. Whether or not these pills were prescribed legally to Owen Hart, I don't know. The personal property report only says police found 2 pill bottles with no labels that contained numerous unknown pills. On a side note, during the investigation into the Chris Benoit murders, police found this same type of medication prescribed to both Chris and Nancy scattered in various locations around the Benoit home. In fact, Daniel Benoit's autopsy report indicates that he had a rather high level of alprazolam in his system at the time of his death. You can check out my Benoit series for more details about what else police found during that investigation. Link to the full playlist is in the description box. That being said, I am not claiming Owen Hart had an addiction to this medication. I'm merely trying to give you some information about the medication itself. So then this report has some additional comments here. It says confirmation of item 4-1, which was this up here, the results of what these pills were. Confirmation of that was made using gas chromatography mass spectrometry, or GC/MS for short. And if you're wondering what that is, that's an analytical method that combines two techniques to identify different substances within a test sample. In this instance, the test sample would have been the pills that needed to be identified. And it identifies these substances by separating the organic compounds and providing structural information. And then that is the end of that document. You can see the whole thing right there in its entirety. So let's see what else we have to look at today. Now, I think it was in part 5 of this series that we looked at some viewing of property reports from when the attorneys had met at police headquarters to view and photograph certain items of evidence. And here we have another viewing of property by attorneys document. And it's for the same property as in part 5, but this is on 6/30/1999. So this is on the same day as the crime lab report of findings we just looked at, the one identifying the pills. You can see here viewing of property by attorneys, and this report by Detective Martin with the homicide unit. And on this day, 6/30/1999, at 10:30 a.m., it says, at the direction of the police department legal advisor, who is Dale Close, Detective Martin and Sergeant David Bernard responded to the legal office with the equipment, rigging, harness, cape, and mask involved in this case. And while they were there at the legal office, Anita Robb, Terry Griggs, and their specialist, Gary Foy, were allowed to view the items and photograph the items, but were not allowed to touch or move the items. At the conclusion of the viewing, Detective Martin and Sergeant Bernard repackaged the equipment and secured the items in the Violent Crimes Unit safe. Yes, you heard that correctly, the Violent Crimes Unit. So not only is the homicide unit investigating this accident, but the rigging equipment, harness, the cape, and the mask are being secured in a safe in the Violent Crimes Unit. I find that really interesting, especially considering that the date now is 6/30/1999, so this is more than a full month after Owen's death. And we've got Homicide Unit and Violent Crimes Unit. I think this is also interesting that they weren't allowed to touch or move the items. They were only allowed to view and photograph them. Now, I believe we've seen these names before, Anita Robb and Terry Griggs, with one of the other viewing of property by attorneys reports. I think they were with the law firm of Robb and Robb, who were representing Owen's family. And the attorneys at Robb and Robb are located in Kansas City, Missouri. And an interesting detail is that they specialize in aviation law, handling catastrophic cases nationwide since 1984. And apparently they handled the Kobe Bryant helicopter crash in 2020. If you've been following this series, you might recall police had been in contact with Al Garbino, who was with the Motion Pictures Aviation Service. And the police told Garbino they were seeking a specialist to consult with regarding this case. You can see more about that in Part 8. But yeah, those are two little details I felt were worthwhile to point out, because we've already established in previous videos that the riggers in charge of planning Owen's stunt used marine equipment meant for sailing rigs. So I think it's really interesting to discover this now about the aviation attorneys. And knowing police spoke with this Al Garbino with the Motion Picture Aviation Services, that makes it even more interesting. But this name here, their specialist, Gary Foy, I wonder if this is the specialist that, what was her name? Donna Mariamsky, the attorney for AmSpec. Remember earlier in this video, Mariamsky was asked if she knew who the riggers were who had worked with Owen the first time this stunt was performed. And Mariamsky said she knew who the rigger was and that he had been retained as an expert on behalf of the victim, but she wouldn't provide the person's identity at that time. Sometimes, by looking at other reports, we can gain insight to other information. So is Gary Foy the same specialist that Mariamsky was referring to but refused to name? I don't know. But that is the end of that document. You can see the signature down here at the bottom. So that was a really short one, but we have another viewing of property by attorney's report to look at. So let's take a look at that one now. So now the investigation is moving into July. As you can see, the next document is dated July 2nd, 1999. And this is another viewing of property by attorney's report by Detective William Martin with the Homicide Unit, and it's a one-page report. And on July 2nd, 1999, at 1:10 p.m., Detective Martin and Detective Rob Rickett responded to the legal office of the police department with the equipment and harness used regarding this case. This was to allow the following attorneys to view and photograph the items, but again, they were not allowed to touch or move the items. And then there's a list here of the attorneys that were present, and listed here is James C. Grosses, liability specialist with Cigna Property and Casualty. And that particular company is registered in the state of Connecticut, which is the state that WWE's corporate headquarters are located. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the attorney for Cigna is representing WWE or McMahon himself, as there are Cigna Group locations in Kansas City, Missouri. So while I don't know this for certain, if I had to guess, I'd say that all of these attorneys listed in this report were representing Kemper Arena, the location in Kansas City, Missouri that hosted the Over the Edge event where Owen Hart lost his life. Because the other two attorneys listed here, Mark E. Harris and Paul L. Wickens with Foland & Wickens, PC. And Foland & Wickens is also located in Kansas City, Missouri. But then this report says, at the conclusion of the viewing, the items were repackaged by the reporting detective and secured again in the Violent Crimes Unit vault. So what is up with that? And then that is all that there is to that report, and I think I'm going to stop here for now. The next episode will feature that in-person interview police have scheduled with Tom DeWeer from the International Stunt Association in Hollywood. And with his assistance, police are going to test the equipment by doing a recreation of the stunt to try to figure out what went wrong. So part 10 is going to be a big one for sure. So if you enjoy the content, please subscribe and hit that little bell so you receive notification when the next video drops. Please feel free to leave any comments or questions, and if you'd be interested in supporting the channel, you may do so directly via YouTube by choosing the new Super Thanks feature. When you purchase a Super Thanks, you will see a special animated GIF, and as an added bonus, you will get a distinct, colorful banner to highlight your comment. Or if you would prefer, you may send contributions to the Cash App link in the description box. This has been AmKay. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye!